Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. This is Mr. E from Media Mash and I have with me Billy K. Billy, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you, mate?
Yeah, mate, I am very good. Excellent. Alrighty, so we got some interesting things to talk about tonight. Some interesting things have been going through the headlines. The first one I think we want to mention is that what is with constantly calling Australia racist? So the last couple of times I've been driving home from work, I hear on the radio the same call-in going, "Is Australia racist? Do you have any stories?" So, mate, what have you found about that?
Okay, well, look, I think it's a case of if you repeat a lie often enough, people start to believe it. I think what sort of thrust that issue into the spotlight lately is the that TV show on SBS called "The Truth About Racism" or some such.
Yeah.
Is that the one we're talking about?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. This is great. Look, I think what's really rich about this program being on SBS is they have an entire program called like Legally Brown or the Fear of a Brown Planet or both of those things. But basically, it's an entire program giving these two subcontinental comedians. One of them's Nazim Hussain, who's a bit better known in the comedy circuit, and his lesser known friend Akmir Rahman. Now, basically, this program is 1 hour for these two guys to just say the most libelous shit.
Yeah, right.
What's funniest about it too is if you ever look on these guys' social media feed, they're some of the most vehement supporters of 18C. And you think if that law was actually applied consistently, those two would probably be the biggest beneficiaries of it being abolished.
Just for everyone listening, do you want to just fill people in on what is 18C?
Okay, I don't have the exact wording of it in front of me, but it's a law in Australia's constitution that stipulates that someone who says anything that either offends or insults someone on the basis of their race is susceptible to be dragged through the courts and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think these two may get away with it on 18D, which I believe stipulates that if that falls under the umbrella of artistic expression, quote unquote, then they don't get dragged through the courts. Obviously, there's probably people more legally astute than I am who could correct me on the finer points of that, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
You give these guys enough rope and let them talk for long enough, and it becomes pretty obvious it's not artistic expression. It is dormant, visceral dislike of this country and the majority of the people who live in it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to put up some links for people to see just how bad it is.
We could do a whole other show on these two blokes, but we won't. Not yet.
Yeah, we'll leave it there for now. Because I mean, I remember that whole that episode of Q&A a couple of weeks ago where I don't know what her name was, but she was some Muslim activist speaking up about Sharia law and this type of stuff. Do you remember what her name was?
I do. I believe it's Yasmin Abdel Magid. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah,
I will never forgive myself if I have.
Yeah.
I'll never forgive myself if I pronounce that incorrectly, but I think that's how you say it. I believe this new program on SBS also featured her quite prominently, and that alone takes all credibility out of this program if the central theme of it is that Australia is racist. Look, after her performance on Q&A, she's really been thrust into the spotlight in the worst possible ways. And frankly, the left and the left media, if they really want to keep their powder dry, they should disavow her pretty fast. I mean,
she's awful.
She is. She's not. She's an eminently unlikable person, at least her public profile. And look, I think any sort of conservative or libertarian-minded people who find her views abhorrent, and I certainly do, should actually hope she gets a bit more airtime because, you give her enough rope and it's poison. It's poison for the legacy media's cause, really, if they want to double down behind her.
See, what always gets me is she's there preaching to us, saying Sharia law's not this and Sharia law's not that. Why doesn't she go into these countries like Saudi Arabia and Yemen and all these things where people are performing all these atrocities under the name of Sharia law and say, hey, you're giving Sharia law a bad name? I mean, of course, she's not going to do that because they'd probably hang her for doing it. But
well, it's funny. It's funny you did mention that. I do believe she did go on a taxpayer-funded tour of several countries that actually do practice Sharia law, supposedly to promote Australia and immigration to Australia to these countries. How perfect is that?
Ah, yeah.
And
so we get more people coming from there to jump on welfare. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, possibly, but I think what's risible is she visited these countries, and obviously the human rights abuses there didn't bother her one bit. But she's more than ready to go on TV and tell all and sundry about how inhumane Australia is. It's funny if it wasn't so harmful, actually. But
yeah, absolutely, and it also it's kind of like there was that guy that got done for planning attacks in the MCG on grand final day of the AFL last year. They worked out that he'd collected over $1 million in welfare payments in the last 10 years. Apparently he's done less than a week's worth of work since 1995.
$1 million?
Yeah, $1 million. He's collected
Jesus.
over $1 million from Centrelink. And it's like they even tried to deport him. So what he did was he married a Muslim Australian woman, and then that gave him all the entitlement he needed to stay here. And then even after he's sat back and collected all that taxpayer money, he's still off, planning a terrorist attack to kill hundreds of people. It just boggles the mind, really. Yeah, and then the answer to it is to say, oh, is Australia racist? I mean, if you even type into Google just the first two words, is Australia, then it comes up with all those suggested searches. The first one it comes up with is Australia racist. It's like, what are they trying to feed here? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Man, if that man is the fruit of Yasmin's labours, then she ought to be really disappointed. Or maybe she wouldn't be disappointed. Maybe that's the problem to begin with.
Yeah, she probably doesn't care. She just wants to get her time in front of the cameras. Not a moral bone in her body. It's just
she does have an axe to grind as well, by the look of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just a shame that they had Jackie Lambie on Q&A arguing with her because she's
of all people.
Yeah, she's probably equally stupid. So it was just two women screaming at each other back and forwards. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the racism issue and whatnot? I mean,
no,
I'm sure we'll come back to it one day, but
I have a feeling it's something we'll talk about frequently. To be honest,
yeah.
Unfortunately,
we'll moving it along. And it's kind of it's another theme here. So one of the other recent headlines, more internationally, obviously is Sweden and what's going on over there. And I mean, because after the Don mentioned it in his Donald Trump mentioned it in his speech in Florida, and even the way he mentioned it, it just shows you that. The guy is a salesman. He kind of threw it in there it was like the upsell. When you're selling someone and you're in the middle of a pitch, and then he's like, and Sweden, and what about Sweden? So it was kind of like he just sort of threw it in there to get people kind of interested, and then to go off and start doing their own research about it. And what I've uncovered in sort of researching about it just on the internet in the last couple of weeks, it's just amazing. I mean, we touched on it in our Media Mash short video, sort of exposing some of the lies that CNN were coming up with and whatnot, and it's just crazy, and it's more of this kind of the government's trying to kind of cover everything up and make it look like it's just a kind of...
You mean the Swedish government?
Yeah, the Swedish government, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just trying to cover it up, make it look like it's just that the national crime rate's going really high, nothing to do with sort of immigration and, recently
Yeah.
taking in. And I mean, one of the things I found out was that it's not actually just the most recent wave of immigrants, because I mean, they've had very kind of loose immigration policies for the last kind of 20 odd years, and it's actually a lot of the crime is coming up from people that sort of immigrated 10, 15 years ago. And what the sort of the media over there, I mean the real media, not like the legacy media, what the real media over there is reporting on and what they're actually concerned about is that now that the immigration's so, there's so many immigrants there, it's like 20 or 30%, somewhere between 20 and 30% of the nation are people that were born abroad, and they're people that they've come to the country not because they have anything to offer, but essentially they're running away from their own country, and they need a country that's going to kind of support them with welfare, because they're not coming there with any means to sort of earn or contribute.
That's right. Yeah, they've shopped around for a country. I mean, that Sweden's not the only country to experience that, but I think a story which was quite telling is one from, I believe it was 1 or 2 weeks ago now. A fed-up police officer from one of the local police forces approached the media, and he outlined a week in the life of a Swedish police officer. He had, rape, sexual assault, aggravated assault, theft, armed robbery. And then he just goes, and I've got a list of suspects here. Mohammed, and all the various different spelling of Muhammad, and then there was one Sven there for good measure. So like there was one Swedish suspect, but that speaks volumes about the situation in Sweden at the moment. And I think regarding Trump's statement, what's funny about that is he was pilloried for it from pillar to post by the legacy media, CNN leading the charge, and within a day of his statement and him being mocked for it, this huge riot broke out in Stockholm, in a suburb with a really high demographic of Muslim migrants, which just sort of played right into his hands. And these agenda-driven suckholes in the legacy media had egg on their face,
Well, that riot was sparked off because they were trying to arrest some gang member who was, and then they pulled him in, and then the rest of his gang just started blowing up cars and looting places. And
any word on what they were trying to arrest him for?
Oh, it was gang-related activities, so bringing in drugs and.
How dare they?
Yeah.
How dare they try and arrest him?
Where do they get off?
Racist. Racist. Yeah.
That just says it. Yeah.
You said you alluded to the fact before that the Swedish government go to great lengths to cover it up and chrome over it. Yeah. It reminds me of an interview Douglas Murray did on BBC a few days ago, or more of a debate than an interview. He was alongside a Swedish government minister who was on the show to be interviewed, and she was obviously in complete denial about the situation in Sweden. Those riots have nothing to do with immigration. They have more to do with socio-economic factors, and it's all lies. It's all a big right-wing conspiracy. And then he brought up Rotherham as a cautionary tale. For anyone who doesn't know about Rotherham, that was an incident or several incidences over the course of a few years, I think in the late 90s through to the early 2000s, something along the lines of 1,500 children, mostly girls, were sexually assaulted by, I would say largely, but I think more accurate would be overwhelmingly Muslim migrants or the sons.
This was in
Rotherham is a town in England.
This was all the Pakistani.
Yes.
I remember this one.
Yeah, and basically the entire political class let these kids down. I mean, the police were reportedly apprehensive about taking further action because they didn't want to be labelled racist and they didn't want to be dragged through the courts. And the media also went to great lengths to, either report on it ambiguously or not report on it at all every chance they got. And, in this interview, or in the debate rather, Douglas Murray drew some sort of troubling parallels between the situation in Sweden and Rotherham. But really, I don't have a whole lot to add on that one. I mean, I think
Well,
that's a
I mean,
situation that'll
we
unfold.
also here in Sydney. I mean, we had sort of large amounts of
The scaff.
immigrants from Lebanon and whatnot in the 80s and the 90s, and we had a massive cover up. Like there was huge like gang rapes and whatnot going on. Like I remember a friend of mine, he just lived in the inner west here, and he was saying he was just walking home and he saw a group of like 30 sort of Lebanese guys just raping a girl, like straight up, like right in the middle of a public park. They just had her surrounded, and yeah, and he called the cops. There was nothing else he could do, but there's been like instances of this going on for sort of decades. I mean, now it's becoming more well known because it's happening all over the world, but it's been something that's been going on in Sydney and covered up for quite a long time.
Yeah, that's right. I certainly haven't seen anything like that in Sydney, and hope to Christ never do. But the case of the Scuff brothers comes to mind right now. That was in early 2000s when I believe it was Bilal Scuff and his brother and a raft of his friends. They went on a rampage over the course of a few months, picking up girls aged between, I think, anywhere between about 13 to 18. One of the first questions they would ask every one of their victims was, "Are you Australian?" Every single time, without question, "Are you Australian?"
So it's straight up a hate crime.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah. It is absolutely a hate crime. Something strategic about it all, and thank God, one of the only girls, or perhaps the only girl, who had the fortitude to come forward. And when I say that, I don't mean to denigrate the other victims in any way. I can understand why they didn't want to go to court and testify. It would have been incredibly intimidating, especially with Scuff's mother trying to stop the victims in the hallway and call them whore in Arabic. I think it's mashuta or something like that. It would have been a really, really arduous ordeal to do that. But one girl did. And the very first question they asked her when they struck up a conversation with her was, "Are you Australian?"
Yeah.
She said, "I'm as Australian as they come. I'm an Aborigine." But anyway, the rest of the story is pretty horrible to tell. Our viewers are welcome to look that up anytime they like if they want to know more. But basically, nowhere is exempt from this sort of cultural enrichment.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that's essentially what it is. I mean, it's mixing together cultures that just aren't compatible for whatever reason. I mean, the cultures aren't compatible, and when you force it together on such a large scale, you're just asking for you're just asking for serious issues. And just going back to Sweden quickly, I mean, the violence there though, like the gangs of immigrants that they're dealing with, they're becoming like crazy organized. Like I saw a clip,
and emboldened as well.
And what? Sorry,
emboldened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, today I saw a clip on the news of this independent journalist, and he showed this footage of these guys. They just drove a car straight into a shopping mall to smash it open, jump out of the car with AK-47s to clear the crowd, and then just rob a bank straight up. It's like, you know what I mean?
They're becoming more brazen.
Yeah, that's serious levels of like organised crime, and that, I mean, the fact that they had AK-47s, like that's, you know what I mean? Like they're properly armed. Like most police are not equipped to combat that at all. And then
the Swedish police armed like they are here.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. So I just watched a Norwegian report recently that showed just how heavily the Swedish police are arming themselves now to get ready for just their regular nighttime patrols. Like they're going out in full riot gear with automatic weapons and heavily armored, and every night they're going out sort of as if they're getting ready to go into a war zone just about. It's crazy. I mean, we just to mention the Media Mash episode 1, where we just to show how poorly CNN are reporting on it, and they've got like a Democrat official on there, and he's laughing about it. He's going, oh, I don't know, it's pretty bad. Donald Trump's mentioning this, and it's like, this is what's going on on the other side of the world. And had Donald Trump not won that election, imagine
no one would be giving it any attention whatsoever. It'd go back to it'd be reported by alternative media outlets like InfoWars, Free Domain Radio, whatever, Rebel Media. Among others. Yeah, it'd just be, I'm glad someone with his profile has finally had the, audacity to bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything else you wanted to mention on Sweden, or should we jump on to our next topic?
Last thing on Sweden, you can't help but feel it's just a situation that it is going to get worse. There is no ifs about it. It is a situation that will deteriorate before our eyes, and some people there, by the sounds of it, are starting to come to their senses, but I think in that country things have to get a lot worse before they get better, if they get better at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
they can only write this off as a right-wing conspiracy for so long before the.
Well, see, that's why they're suppressing it, because it's not that the left are kind of on the side of the Muslims or whatever, or the immigrants. It's just that because they're the ones responsible for letting them into the country, it's if they admit that they're at fault by doing it, it's political suicide. They'll be voted out straight away. So
it's worse than that. It's sociopathy. They just cannot take accountability for their own mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, cool.
Order of business.
Yeah, so should we move it along then? On to
Shall.
the next topic? All right. Well, the other one that's been in the headlines of recent is this. It's called Title IX, which is the kind of which is the law they have in the US to stop discrimination based on sex or gender.
Mm-hmm.
And it the Obama administration just bastardized that completely, and they've brought in these federal transgender laws where you have to let a sort of a person that identifies as whatever gender into that appropriate bathroom based on whatever their identity is. And there was actually an interesting article in the Daily Wire which went on about, so the Democrats say there's no instances of this causing violent crime, and then they went over 9 instances where a man who has claimed to identify as a woman has gone into a woman's bathroom or locker room and sexually assaulted people in there. Like it's just absurd. The whole teenage girl that was the wrestler that took testosterone.
That's right.
And then they were like, oh, see, look, she's beating up all the girls. We should have let her in the boys' division. And it's like, no, if you're taking testosterone, you are not allowed to compete in contact sports. Like, it's basically a given across the board. If you take
This is reminiscent of Fallon Fox. You told me we were going to talk about the wrestler before we started the podcast.
Yep.
But I just because I knew we were going to be talking about it, I looked up a couple of videos of Fallon Fox knockouts. She's the MMA fighter.
Yeah.
They are absolutely fucking savage. I mean,
it almost looks like domestic violence, or
or it looks like a man fighting a child. That just, when your body, regardless of what procedures you've had, transgender women, I understand that to mean people who are born male and then have made the transition to become female, or any of the other 1,000 genders we have now, but their bodies are producing more testosterone than their women counterparts. That's just a salient and demonstrable fact.
Well, testosterone Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
go
right.
on.
It's just a performance enhancer
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, that's right. And the fact that they're like, oh no, she should be fighting in the boys division because she's taking this testosterone. It's like, no, it just bans her from being able to participate in sport. I think what really sort of got me about this issue was watching that MSNBC where they interviewed George Takei, of all people. Like, George Takei is just the creepiest dude going around, and then he was he was the kind of person that they brought in to get on his opinion on transgenderism, and it's like, oh, this dude is like an advocate of pedophilia. He's like, the way he talked about his experience of being molested as a child was just,
In the summer camp.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
just wrong. I mean, we did a bit on that as well with one of our videos, but yeah, he is one creepy dude, and the fact that that's the guy who MSNBC interviewed, and they wonder why they're losing all credibility. Like, I saw a graph where it was like MSNBC lost 50% of its ratings in, I think, from 2013 to 2014 or something. They're worth a fraction of what they were once upon a time. Like, all these sort of legacy media outlets, they're reporting on all these really sensitive issues and making out that the way that they don't have an agenda or anything behind them, and it's just terrible reporting. Yeah.
Well, they're creatures of habit. The legacy media. These are strategies. These are methods that have worked for them for many years. Worked a treat for them in the 80s and the 90s, but those days are gone. There's just a lot more information out there. And
yeah, exactly.
For example, if they want to roll out some creepy guy like George Takei to be the sort of renter quote for whatever the sort of social justice cause celebrity is, cause du jour rather.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more. People have a privy to a lot more information to discredit it, which isn't it really. Basically, information to discredit that isn't really hard to find these days, is it?
Yeah, it's all over the place. Speaking of alternative media, Alex Jones on Infowars, I tell you what, he dropped the bombshell, and he's just today. He said the Democrats are grooming Oprah Winfrey to run in 2020, and I'm interested.
I heard that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays out. He's just got such a knack for getting these scoops, well before it becomes like public knowledge. You got to give it to him. Like he's very passionate about what he does, but he's
people who laugh at Alex Jones are laughing at the other. They're laughing at the other side of their faces now. I mean, it's easy to mock him as that crazy guy who says the chemtrails are making frogs gay and all that stuff, or the guy who rips off his shirt in his studio. But
yeah. But the chemtrails, like all this stuff, it's coming out like
that's an indulgence. That's an indulgence I want to talk about later. That's brilliant, the chemtrails one and the frogs. But I mean, calling a spade, he's got a lot more right in the last 18 months than the legacy media have. I mean,
he was the one that broke the scoop on Hillary Clinton having epilepsy or whatever it was that meant she couldn't stand in one spot for half an hour or whatever. But yeah,
they tried to laugh it off. They tried to laugh it off as a right-wing conspiracy or a crackpot sort of radio show conspiracy before it actually became a fact. But he also, to his credit, he gave due coverage to things like Project Veritas, which is basically buried during the election cycle. But I think that's a discussion to be had for another day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's he was while all the sort of more quote unquote reputable news organisations were saying that Hillary's going to romp it in and it's just a formality, she's going to win it. He sort of stuck to his guns and he was unabashedly confident that Trump was going to win and Hillary would lose. I mean, on that alone, he gets a few more credibility points than these sort of shiny ass frogs in CNN and BBC who laugh at him.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that actually brings us along quite nicely to the last point of the night, which is, these people in CNN, and then you've got all these celebrities crapping on, like they have real opinions and they're political experts and whatnot. And I mean, some of the stuff that comes out of celebrities' mouths, it just boggles the mind. Like Rosie O'Donnell calling for martial law, and it's like, who do you think are going to be the worst off in martial law? Like, it's obviously the people that are sitting back in their mansions and they've got no idea of what's really going on out there in the public.
I love this. I love this. And Sarah Silverman saying that the military are gonna march on Washington and start a coup and drag Trump out of the White House by his hair, his fantastic hair. No, I mean what I find just laughable about this is now a revolution or coup on the scale that they're proposing you'd need the military for that.
Yeah.
And one thing I can safely say, look, maybe some people in the military do vote Democrats. In fact, no, some of them certainly do, but largely the military fucking hate those people. It's you really think Marines and soldiers from fucking, a mining town in Virginia are gonna like boot Trump out of the Air Force boot Trump out of the White House for you? You're like that. They've been in their bubble for too long. They need to get serious.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I mean, Trump is a sort of military law and order candidate. Like, he's straight up said, he's increasing military budget and all this.
I don't have any hardcore data to back this up, but I think I can safely say I would bet the house the military like Trump. They fucking hate Sarah Silverman. They hate Rosie O'Donnell. And they, at best, they're indifferent to Leonardo DiCaprio, apart from some of the sick movies he's in.
Oh, yeah. Actually, the last Paul Joseph Watson skit, I think we've got it on the Media Mash Facebook page as well.
Yes.
The last skit he did roasting Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong, like, DiCaprio is he's a quality actor. He came on the scene with just sort of a typical pretty face, and and over the years he's gotten considerably more talented. Like, that's for sure.
Oh, the movies he's in, those movies alone, cut him a bit of slack in my book, because they are just such good
they're
movies.
Quality. They're good quality.
But this I love this. I've been in love with this story since I heard about it. Like, it's common wisdom that he is a frequent user of private jets to get places. I mean, why not? Why not? If I had that sort of cash to burn, I would do it without a doubt. But and again, this celebrity bullshit is something I feel like we'll be talking about quite frequently. But in that video, like, I didn't know the extent of
fossil fuel usage.
There's fossil fuel usage. That's right. I mean, the most recent development is he brought a fucking eyebrow artist from Sydney to the United States for the just one eyebrow artist from the Sydney to the United States for the Oscars. I mean, by the way, in Sydney we have the best eyebrow artist. Yeah, Everybody knows this.
We're famous for our eyebrow artists.
That's it. We lead the way in eyebrow art. We are the fucking best. We are the eyebrow arts masters.
Well, clearly, we're getting our eyebrow artists are getting flown all over the world just for for the Oscars. Yeah.
Nobody does eyebrow art like we do. Believe me.
Nobody's better. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh, this one's even better. No. I love this. He said that that Bono, another celebrity, his favourite hat from, I believe it was the UK to Italy.
Sorry, dude, we just lost you there. Do you want to just tell us the
beginning
of that story again?
Where were
about Bono.
Yeah, this is awesome. Bono, famous for pontificating about using less fossil fuels and whatnot, once had his favourite hat flown to him from the UK to Italy.
Oh, that was brilliant, yeah.
A
Yeah.
hat.
How do they even? And what was it? And then Leo went on some private boat with a sheik from Saudi Arabia who's
They're like
basically
an oil baron sheik.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I mean, these people aren't. Their problem is they're not very self-aware.
Mate, one of these days we'll have to do a thing on climate change because it's just one of those ones where it's just the ultimate scam. I mean, does the government really need an excuse just to tax you more? Like, even if climate change, man-made climate change was real, all it's resulted in is more taxes.
If they want you to vote for them, then they need to find an excuse. But I want to say this about climate change and all that stuff. I think it's important for me to be aware of my own ignorance. I've never really been a man of science on this, so I am loath to sort of get too deeply into debate about climate change. But I will say this. It does seem, from the outside looking in, and by that I mean the outside of the scientific community, that the consensus we had 7-8 years ago around the time of that Al Gore documentary isn't the consensus we have now. It seems to have just be falling apart behind your eyes. It seems every year
all the predictions they made,
yeah, and it seems a lot of the data they use. It turns out they've cooked the books. A lot of the data they've used and the predictions they've made have been manifestly false. And what's more, it seems that more people in the scientific community seem to break ranks and actually, put their hands up and say that either A, it's a big hoax, like I'm not going to make that step, that the whole thing's a hoax. And some of them say we're in nowhere near as much danger as you've been led to believe. It is a massive scare campaign. And some people have put their hand up and said, oh, yeah, we have cooked the books. And another thing I want to say about climate change is some of the people most eager to hoist this on us and push this issue into the spotlight.
Bill Nye, the science guy, for one, yeah.
Well, let's just call a spade here. Greens, far leftists in all the other Western countries, on the issue of immigration and debt, their policies and their positions. Hey, babe. Hey, just doing that Skype thing. I'll be out in a minute. Their policies and positions are so far removed from reality that when they do want to come to you with this issue of climate change, it's hard to take them seriously. It's like you tell me that if you bring a million fighting age men from the Middle East into Western Europe, that's not going to be a problem. But you want me to believe this bullshit? It just puts suppose it is real. They've just obliterated their credibility by being so intellectually dishonest.